and welcome to the 6th season of Big Ideas. I'm Andrew Moody, and this is my day planner. Oh, I'm not ashamed to admit it. I still use one. For example, I need to remind myself that Big Ideas this season is going to air at 4 p.m. on Saturdays and Sundays. I find it easier to use a pen and a paper than to use one of these. Oh, it's a day planner. It's a phone. It gets your email. It hooks you up to the internet. It instant messages. It plays music. It takes pictures. And it's also supposed to make you work better and faster. And not to put too much of a fine point on it, it scares the crap out of me. And I know I'm not alone. There are many of us who wouldn't mind if the world was unfolding a bit more slowly. The rapid rate of change makes us all a little uneasy. There's less and less time to think about where we are going before we get there. Alvin Toffler saw it all coming. He gained fame and recognition as the author of Future Shock, and in it, he warned that in the future, we will experience a troubling anxiety created by an overload of information. He has just co-written a book with his wife, a new book, with the promising title, Revolutionary Wealth. In it, he argues that our current institutions are woefully unprepared for the demands of a world reshaped by the force of technology. Here is Alvin Toffler, offering us his view of what is around the corner. He was speaking at the library of the University of Toronto's Hart House.
Revolutionary Wealth covers many, many topics. I mean, if you flip through the pages of that book, you'll find stuff about family structure. You'll find stuff about every topic under the sun. But the object of the book is to synthesize seemingly disparate or unconnected events and forces in society and ask ourselves, why is all this happening, and what effect does the economy have on all of this, and where is the economy going as a consequence of these changes? One of the ideas in the book, or let me start from the beginning, that we talk about a new economy. Well, the press is full of references to the new economy. And by that, we generally mean the shift toward a knowledge-based economy. And I think that's a fairly widely understood concept now, although I don't think the depth of that is understood. Moreover, we call it the new economy, but it isn't new. In fact, if you wanted to date the beginnings of the new economy, you would have to go back to the mid-1950s. And the reason, and indeed, unlike most events, major events in history, it's hard to find a date. When did the Industrial Revolution start? You know, we don't know the answer to that question. But if I had to choose a date for when the new economy and the social and other ramifications of that began, there is a date. And that date probably would be 1956. Why? Because that is the first year in the United States when the number of white-collar and service employees outnumbered blue-collar factory workers. That was a major change in the composition of the U.S. labor force. If that were all, it would be significant. But if you then look at the next 5 years, a series of things happened. Within the half decade from that point in the United States, first of all, television was universalized. Prior to 1956, if you wanted to watch television in the States, you went to a bar or a gin mill down on the corner because you couldn't afford a television set. Within 5 years, 98% of Americans had television sets. Rapid dissemination of television. That was just the beginning. We had, within that same period, the introduction of commercial jet aviation, able to cross the continent. Those were the small events that happened. On October 4, 1957, which happened to be my birthday, something called Sputnik went up to the moon, and the space age was born. And on top of that, in that same period, a little technology called the birth control pill was introduced, with changes in gender relationships, sexual relationships, and all the rest of that. And on top of that, during that same period, Hollywood underwent a tremendous change. These used to be, the movies all had happy endings. Heroes were heroes. The boy and girl would march off into the sunset at the end, and we knew they were going to get married. And suddenly out came Marlon Brando on the waterfront, and James Dean, and suddenly Hollywood went from heroes to anti-heroes, so that today they are drug dealers, criminals, etc., presented as heroes. And there were many other cultural changes that occurred. In short, that period of time was very intense, very filled with change, and much overlooked, because mostly when you ask Americans what happened in the 50s, well, there was McCarthyism, but it was a pretty dead decade otherwise. It wasn't. And it was immediately followed in the early years of the next decade with the women's movement, the civil rights movement, the gay movement, the assassination of a president, the president forced out of office. It was a wild and woolly decade that followed. I argue in this book that these events, and that's not all, actually represented the dawn of a new, not just a new technology or even a new economy, but of a new way of life, or, properly speaking, a new civilization. And that we, especially in the States, but certainly here as well, have been experimenting with the creation of a new civilization based on a new kind of economy. And the economic changes and the obvious parts of it, the part that shows, have been the fantastic technological developments that have just come out one after another since then. But one thing that probably everybody in this room understands is that technology, as brilliant and magnificent as the ideas and the thinking and the genius of the inventors has been, that's the easy part of a transformation or a revolution. The hard part are the accompanying social changes. That's hard to change. Changing an institution is very hard. Changing a chip may be less difficult than changing an institution. And I don't mean to reduce the importance and the difficulty of designing a new chip, for example, but you're not up against the political changes and the kind of opposition that you always face when you want to make important social change. So we believe, and in this book we argue, that we're in the middle of a process of creating a new way of life. As far as the economy is concerned, the wealth part of the title, we begin by saying we do not mean by wealth, the word wealth, we do not just mean money. Economists just mean money, and that is what they measure. And we're pretty good at measuring. We think we're pretty good at measuring. We have metrics, we have theories, we have lots and lots of data, but there's a hidden part of the economy, a hidden part, which I'll get to in a moment. I believe, and the book argues, that the changes have been so profound, and the changes still ahead are so profound, that they are obsoleting what we think we know about economics. And they remind me, and we write about the French physician, François Quesnay, who was the palace doctor for Madame Pompadour in the late 1600s. He was a genius. He not only was a brilliant doctor and knew more about blood and the blood system than anybody, he also wrote papers on economics, on the price of grain, what happens to the price of grain, and he wrote papers on the economy of Peru and what's happening in China. He was regarded as the greatest thinker of his time. And he concluded, and he was, to that degree, but there's one thing he missed. He announced that the only productive people in society were either landowners or peasants, because all wealth came from agriculture. That's how you built a strong economy in those days. Therefore, he missed, I had the following word. He not only said that they were the only productive ones, but that everybody else was, in his word, sterile. The others were sterile as far as economics were concerned. He couldn't imagine that in a half century or a century more, it would be the sterile people who would create this incredible new revolution, the Industrial Revolution, with people moving, becoming urbanized, and all the changes